and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Dionne of DB Organics. Dionne, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so I'd like to kick things off with your upbringing. Where did you grow up, and what would you say your childhood was like?
So I grew up in the west side of Vancouver, and when it was very hippie-ish, in
Yeah,
the 1970s, on the West Coast, with very hippie parents who, we grew stuff in our backyard. We shopped at stores that were then called health food stores.
yeah.
Down the block from David Suzuki and also the Stevens family and lots of people who kind of have grown up to flourish in the natural
Mm,
organic space and also be advocates for
incredible,
this way of living.
incredible. So, I mean, to get into that way, what was your parents' kind of backgrounds? What did they do when you were a child growing up, and what was that like?
So my mom was a dancer. So she
Mm,
was a modern ballet dancer and had a dance studio. So very creative and artistic. My dad was in sales, and he was an immigrant. He
mm,
immigrated to Canada and was always kind of trying to help his parents out. And we grew up really learning that like it's all about hard work. I started working, I think, when I was like a kid, and I had a red wheelbarrow and I delivered the newspaper, like when I was
wow,
7 or 8 years old.
incredible.
So yeah, I've kind of always grown up that way.
Love it. Growing up, what were some of your aspirations or interests? Were you into like athletics or entrepreneurship? What did that look like?
Oh gosh, I was a real girly girl. I
Yeah.
always wanted to be a mom. I've wanted to be a mom since I started playing house when I was 2. I always played
Mm,
mom. So,
yeah.
and really my life's been about being a mom. Even the evolution, I went in and became an academic and did a PhD, but I did the PhD in maternal-fetal toxicology. So that
Mm,
was about moms. And I did also research in pediatric oncology about children and had my own children. And so it's my life was very much about being a mom, but
yeah.
also being very determined. I once
Mm,
wanted to be I really wanted to be a Broadway star.
yeah.
And I took singing lessons, and I was so determined that I got the phone number for Charles Strauss, who wrote Annie. He was a Broadway producer and writer. And I went to the phone booth, and I took literally, I had a um, skirt full of quarters, and I
Uh-huh.
walked like a half a mile because I wasn't allowed to dial long distance to a phone booth on
Yeah.
10th Avenue near UBC in Vancouver, and I would put quarters in, and I phoned Charles Strauss and said, "I want to be Annie." And he said, I remember him saying to me, just talking to me about, you need to stay in school. You're only, 8 years old. Um,
Yeah.
but I had that determination and drive. And every two minutes it would say insert your quarter, and I would be plinking in these quarters.
Love it.
So one thing I had was determination.
Love it. So where did you end up going to study for your undergrad then? I know PhD, you went to Toronto. Where did you end up going?
So I went just down the hood to University of British Columbia.
Okay.
And at that point, really not knowing that one day I'd go on to do a PhD was really just exploring what is this about. Lots of my friends went to university, and it was really an evolution of what's your passion and what
Yeah.
do you really want to do with this and with your life.
Mm. Yeah, so with that time there, what were some of your aspirations? I know like being a mother was a dream at this time, but career-wise, did you have a path you wanted to take after post-graduation? What did that look like?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to do work with kids. Like that was
Mhm.
always at the base.
Yeah.
And then I started working actually in clinical psychology and had a real somehow a knack,
Mm.
and got a position at the University of British Columbia that normally would be for PhD level graduate
Mm.
positions after
Wow.
my undergrad, because I kind of said, wow, you have a talent in really understanding people, and having people open up.
Hmm.
And so that kind of naturally evolved into, um, being offered a position at the University of Toronto in psychology, moving
Mhm.
there, going on to do a PhD. It was very, very competitive. And then discovering that, you know what, I no longer relate to kids as just little fun kids anymore.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that as a parent.
Mm.
And I just made a personal choice because I know so many amazing child psychologists. But for me, I made a personal choice because I was clinically analyzing every kid I would meet.
Yeah,
And it took away the fun and the joy of the innocence of just being a kid.
for sure.
And yeah, and then I switched to maternal-fetal toxicology.
Mm.
And that was kind of what organically led me to my world and my life with DBs.
So post graduation and prior to DB, was there a piece in your journey here where you went on to have a career somewhere, or was DB a part of the creation right at this time?
So DBs, I actually started DBs from an idea my children had when I was finishing my PhD.
Okay.
So I was very fortunate in my PhD. I had many scholarships and awards, and really was really aiming to open a department in toxicology, like really aiming high in academics. And
Mm.
and then we had our two kids who were 8 and 10 at the time, and our 8-year-old was David, and we took David off of all artificial ingredients, like you name it, we took him off of it.
Mm.
And it was always tough to find him treats. And one day I was in the kitchen with my kids, and David was making tea because he liked unusual things because he wasn't eating those junk foods that we feed so many of our families today. And
Yeah.
his sister was making frozen pops, and they were
Mm.
arguing. And Jocelyn actually said to me, "Mommy, let's make teasicles." And it
Mm.
kind of flashed an idea that I could create a company using my background as a research scientist and a mom,
Yeah.
teach my kids about building something true to the earth. Um, but it also had to have a soul and a
Yeah.
heart to it. And all this stuff happened in like that light bulb moment in the kitchen.
Mm.
And I very naively said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make treats my kids can eat that I'd be proud of. And that was really how DB's evolved. And I was finishing my PhD. So when I was graduating and my kids were there, I had just started DB's. And I remember my
Mm.
mom saying to me, "Oh my God, you're just crazy. Do you ever take a break?"
Yeah.
But I didn't. That wasn't in me. And that's how DB's was born.
I love it. So what did that first formulation and like prototyping look like? Was it in the kitchen mixing teas and freezing that? What, to kind of take us through that, I'm curious.
It was literally that.
Yeah.
Funny enough, we don't make anything with tea anymore. But at the time, it was freezing tea and being
Mm.
very disheartened because it turns into an ice cube,
Yeah.
and which is not good for any level of consumption. Um,
Mm.
and it was an evolution from that in my kitchen. um and it was kind of an evolution of, okay, I'm going to make popsicles, not knowing anything about frozen novelties at the time, or
Yeah.
the consumer packaged good industry, or production. I mean, you name it. I always say I went to school as a PhD, and I went to the school of hard knocks as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur.
Yeah. Love it. So I
Yeah.
mean, at this point, so once you graduated, at what stage was DB's at? Did you launch to be able to sell at this point? What did that look like?
Um, we had just launched. It was literally our nanny at home because I needed someone to help as I was finishing my PhD. Her and I just mixing stuff up in our kitchen. And
Mm.
then I think around the time I was graduating, yes, we started to have product um, in Victoria where I live.
Hmm.
And we're hand delivering popsicles. And I remember it was my friend's store at Aubergine, and I took him popsicles, and he gave me my first check for like,
Wow.
$180 or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just started it very, very, very organically. But one of the one of the core mandates we've always had has been everything has to be on organic farmed ingredients,
Hmm.
because that was why I started. I was studying the effects of exposure to drugs and chemicals in our environment on children's health.
Mm.
And what I found out and learned was shocking. And I was determined to create not only something with healthy ingredients, but a place where farming was done so you're not shortening the life of the farm worker.
Yeah.
There's one thing with the farmer, but the farm worker. So it was
Interesting.
always about healthy bodies, but also enabling the organic industry to
Mm.
get to where it is today, where farm workers are more protected. Um,
Mm.
they are in farms where they're spraying with all sorts of pesticides and herbicides.
So, yeah, where were you sourcing at the beginning then? I mean, having that farmer relationship, were you actually from the start having that relationship? And what did that look like, sourcing?
Yeah, absolutely. Contacting local farms, speaking with local organic producers who would actually turn the farmed ingredients into like a puree in a liquid form, and really understanding how you get certified organic. And actually, within our first, I think, 2 years, year and a half, we became a B Corp, very organically. I think we were
Mm.
one of the first Canadian companies to be a B Corp, because everything we were
Wow.
doing was naturally a B Corp. There's a lot of the business side of things that were set up to really build ethically and with a real give back philosophy. So
Hmm.
yeah, it was kind of there. I always see it as like kind of two trains. One is you're building an amazing product with healthy ingredients and a core
Yep.
part of the business, and then building something that we call Dream Launcher, and our
Mm.
mission, Colorful World, where it's been about my barometer of success is would I be proud to tell my kids this is how we're building DeeBee's, and
Love it.
this is what it means to build with a heart and a soul.
Mm. Incredible. So you mentioned at the beginning selling just locally and very grassroots, organic. What would you say was that first pivotal moment in scaling? Did you guys launch the D2C site or was it a retailer opportunity? I'm curious.
Well, I knew I always wanted to scale. I said, since I was a kid, I had big ambitions. So I
Yeah.
wanted to grow this into something big. And we launched in frozen novelties. We now no longer make anything frozen. I realized even the supply chain of frozen, it's complicated. It's not
Mm.
environmentally friendly. And we So yes, we started with retailer relationships, and it was
Hmm.
hard. Like, doing frozen was tough.
Yeah.
It was expensive. There was, very little margin. It was not the type of environmentally friendly type of shipping I wanted.
Yeah.
And all the above. And then in 2016, the idea came to life to build well, actually it started more like in 2014, 2015. We started talking about a shelf stable
Mm.
freezie, all made with fruit. And that kind of evolution got us to where we are today, which is now we don't make anything frozen. Everything is organically farmed, shelf stable freezies, and about to
Mm.
launch something to a new category as well.
Incredible. I'm sure the listeners are curious, but talking on like organic and using produce, what does that look like to have a product shelf stable and then lasting into the consumer's kitchen for a moment of time when something like that can typically go bad? I'm curious.
Yeah, it was really an evolution of how do we do this and keep it shelf stable without adding ingredients that we don't want to have in our product. We didn't
Yeah.
want malic acid that artificially does things that we didn't want anything in there that wasn't truly organic and from a farm, from a tree, from a root, from a vegetable, from a fruit. Like it's all fruit, but
Yeah.
had to be, you know, thoughtfully sourced. And but when you have that as your core, and you start in frozen,
Mm.
it's you've already got that supply chain sorted out, and you know how and where to get ingredients from. So
Yeah.
that evolution taught me a lot. And I really built DeeBee's from what I knew as a scientist and as a mom, not as an entrepreneur. And so I brought people on kind of to help me on the finance and the operation side who really knew about that side of the business. But it's
Yeah.
always been very much based on um, kind of how would I do this as a scientist, as a mom,
Mm,
and building out and holding strong to our values of always,
mm.
always being organic.
Love it. I mean, the product speaks for itself. I've actually tested it, just about a week ago. I was at my, girlfriend's parents' house, and ironic enough, they had DB's that they just got from Costco. I was like, "No way, I'm having this interview next week."
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
what impact has retail had on DB's? I know you guys are D2C and shelf stable, you can ship, to the consumer, but, I mean, it's impressive. Costco, Walmart, and more. What impact has it had on scaling?
Oh, it's been huge. We've had amazing partnerships, and we've really just touched the tip of the iceberg.
Mm,
Our one of our most delicious products is gelato, which just launched last year, and it has had like a great takeoff and runway.
mm,
So our retail partners have been amazing, and they've been the big part of this evolution. Obviously, D2C is important, and but really accessibility and affordability has always been critical to me. We're one of the only ones that really does. I think we're the only freezer pop company anywhere that only does
mm.
organic. And
Wow.
because we buy at scale, we get that better pricing. And it's been about make this affordable and accessible to every person
Mm,
on the planet, so that it's not just kind of the high end consumer, because we have products for that as well. Like our gelato is a little pricier because it's got organic coconut milk and
for sure.
you know amazing ingredients, but make it accessible.
Yeah.
And I think we've achieved that through retail.
For sure. As a product that's supposed to be enjoyed frozen, do you guys see like seasonality shifts in different regions? What does that look like? 'Cause I'm in the Midwest, for example. So with different season changes and eating it frozen, what does that look like for demand?
Yeah, it there is a seasonality. Like we sell all year round.
Yeah,
So get us all year. But absolutely, when it's hot, you want something to cool you down. So there
yeah,
is that component. We are coming out with something that is kind of all year round.
awesome,
So I'm excited for you guys to learn about that. It's coming out
yeah,
soon on Thrive Market. So
incredible.
we're really excited. But this part, yes, there's a big jump. As soon as it starts to get warm, our DBs goes crazy.
I bet, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at some of the feedback from retailers and also online, what would you say is the main consumer? It's a universal product, but what would you say? Who's buying?
Well, I think what surprised us the most is that close to half of our consumers are not parents. They are people buying it
Mm,
for themselves.
yeah.
So, this has been really made for families, but everybody loves it. And
Mm,
when we launched our gelato, for example, it went viral that moms were hoarding the lime gelato flavor because it was so good and giving their kids everything else. So I think that's what
wow.
surprised us most, has been that
Yeah.
yes, kids love it, but it's so delicious that it's not just a
Mm.
kid product. It's for everybody.
I love it. Looking back, I
Yeah.
mean, just the past few years, what would you say was like a moment of learning for DBs, where maybe like a struggle or maybe an obstacle, maybe it was supply chain and COVID. What would you say like was an obstacle that resulted in like far success from learnings from that? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think, it's that there's the evolution. There's so many obstacles that you
Yeah.
come up against. And I was just reading a friend of mine's post today about all the different obstacles she's had, and she's earlier stage. I do a lot of mentorship. And I have this saying, it's not the challenge you face, it's how you face the challenge.
Yeah.
Every single year, there are challenges. So when COVID hit, we had no D2C.
Mm,
And I said, we are going to have D2C. We're going to have our own Amazon and our own marketplace in 2 months. We're going to do this. And the team was like, there's no
mm,
way. And we did.
yeah.
And we had some of our best years during COVID. We had big growth, and we're
Mm,
still seeing that today. So it's really looking at a challenge as an opportunity.
yeah,
Sometimes it's straight up a really hard challenge, and you just want to cry or scream or yell or jump up and
yeah,
down.
for
And
sure.
sometimes it's like, okay, there's a silver lining in this. How are we going to do this? And it's that,
Mm,
shifting your brain to think of, okay, what's the solution here? And I think
yeah,
that's for me, I love that. Okay, this is the puzzle. How do I put this together and find a
yeah,
solution? And I think that's
for
kind of
sure.
where I thrive is in that space.
Yeah, mentioning evolution, I mean, from the start, starting in your kitchen, for example, how has your supply chain evolved? Do you have a co-man, 3PL? What does production look like now? Are you guys doing in-house? I'm curious.
So, my cousin, uh, he's actually my cousin's wife. He runs our operations and supply chain, and he's a genius.
Mm,
I'm so glad he actually used to do manufacturing himself and had his own factories, um, making hangers early days.
wow.
And he joined us a few years ago, and he's just brilliant. And he really has set up an amazing supply chain where it's very environmentally friendly, it's very efficient, it's cost effective, and
Mm,
we're trying to actually get it so our warehouses kind of have just a short distance in order to travel.
yep,
So we're always perfecting, always working on that side of the business
yep.
and working with our partners, working with our farmers, to make sure that it's the quality we want, it's accessible, and it's environmentally friendly as possible.
Mm, incredible. Well, I like to wrap up each episode with this. If you can share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned or regret along the way, what would you say that would be?
I would say that you got to listen to your heart, and you have to have something in this that you're doing other than you just want to succeed and build something. We
Mm,
built our dream launcher where every person has ownership in the company and every single team member has ownership. And I went from being very lonely, starting
mm,
out by myself, very much by myself, not with a spouse who was a partner, on my own, to now being surrounded by 40 partners, and they're
wow.
all of our team. And that's a lot of the heart and the soul, and it really makes this journey feel like a crocheted blanket that's like
Yeah.
wrapped around you, or a patchwork blanket of different people, and you wrap it
Uh,
around you, and it keeps you cozy, and you can lean on those people. And you need to have, for me, I needed that. And I think that's something that I do a lot of mentorship, and I talk to our teams that, or women or minorities that I tend to mentor, about
mhm.
that philosophy.
Incredible. Well, Dion, thank you so much for joining me today. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out DeeBee's at dbsorganics.com.